Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we bring you day 615 of Russian war with Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Alexey Arestovych, Nikolai Feldman, and Yuri Romanenko in this format. Thank you for your continuous support. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Klaus Preditis. You guys are absolutely fantastic in making our work easier. Today's stream is not going to be light. They discuss a lot of dire issues, one can say, for the front and for Ukraine, for the whole situation. Also, our next translation will be dedicated to a bunch of uncomfortable questions for Alexei, among which some of you will recognize your own questions. So don't be shy. If you have more things to ask, put them in the chat below each stream. We read them all, and if the question is indeed interesting and valid, we send it over for Alexei to answer. And with this, day 615. Enjoy. Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolai Feldman. You are watching War Diary with Alexey Arestovych. Alexey is online with us. Yuri Romanenko is here with me at the studio. Good evening, gentlemen. Hello. 300,000 are the announced losses of Russian Federation in its war in Ukraine. Most of the last few months' losses are aggregated near Avdeevka. According to the publication, Russian troops are losing 40 to 70% of their personnel from Storm Z troops. And according to recent publication, they're using poorly trained and poorly equipped soldiers. What else do we know about the situation there? They're dropping more troops near Avdeevka from other parts of the front to continue their pressure. There was a bit of a pause, but their effort continues now. Now we understand their intentions have not changed. They're still clear. They got detachments from 3 more armies in that part of the front, and they still intend to close these pincers. The ones going to Orlovka and Stepovo Berdichi. And if they get close to closing it, our troops will have huge issues, which some of them we're already facing now. You know, our attitude, my attitude to that fight, to that front, and we should not be smiling and laughing off their losses, because when they say, well, yeah, 300,000 and maybe we'll take Avdeevka, what if they spend 3 million and we'll take Lvov? Will it be easier for us? Right, Alexei. And I'm looking at everything here. It seems like everything is reminiscent of the way it was in Bakhmut. Yes, that's exactly what I was telling. I will switch to military language here, but basically it's the same situation with us fucking up our flanks. We had the same situation with Donetsk, Solidar, Lysychansk. The only place where it didn't quite work out was Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, because one flank we did not lose. They were coming from the left, from Izium, but on the other side they couldn't. So we kept one flank there. Of course, one can be giddy about the number of 300,000 of their losses, but it would be better if we would be celebrating not their deaths, but our successes. Because in the Second World War, Russia lost 27 million altogether. And where did the war end? So our task is that this war would not be finished in Kiev or Lvov, and it would rather finish closer to the borders of our original borders of the country. And it is more important for me to count our achievements rather than their losses. Some people can say that their losses are our achievements. Yes, somewhat, but I'm talking about achievements that allow us to avoid losses of our people, our territory, and our equipment. A key question, Alexei, when do we know to withdraw our troops from Avdeevka? From my point of view, we need to withdraw them when it's a direct threat to the line of supply, and it usually happens under the same scenario. They put the main supply line under fire control, and at that point, every delivery to the defending area suffers some losses. It costs you every time to bring troops, to bring equipment. Remember, like the Baltseva was holding till they took Loginovo. So, same situation here, and when eventually it becomes very chaotic to continue delivering supplies, it becomes catastrophic. So I would say when the main supply line is under fire control from the enemy, and our command will clearly see that they will not be able to remove that fire control, then our military need to impress their will on our politicians and to make them give an order to withdraw troops to the new positions to continue defense of the region, if not the town of Avdeevka, but at least that area to the west. But somehow we very often miss this moment, mostly for political reasons, because, of course, we never surrender an inch of our land, although every professional understands that you will still, it's inevitable to lose territory. You lose some here, you gain one there. And also, we are fighting Russian Federation, which economic machine is much bigger than Ukrainian. And you cannot not lose territories during the process. You will lose some in some part, but you can gain other parts. For example, today, that's what's happening. Today, our enemies finally acknowledged that they have serious issues in Kherson direction, where we actually crossed the river and conducting active operations on the left bank. So it's not one color on every part of the front, it's different. And it's important to continue to remain flexible. When we are talking that Avdeevka is an issue, it's not because we want us to lose Avdeevka, that we're likely to lose it. We're not eager that for us to lose that area to just shame Zelensky or some of his political position. No, it's not about that. We're just highlighting the deficiencies that need to be addressed. There is also some interesting stats about Russian Federation using correctable air bombs. We have a data that they've used 1,165 correctable air bombs during this month. Also, a record of a sort was set on the 23rd of October. About 100 bombs of that type were dropped. So, in your opinion, how much F-16 can push them away from the front line? Yes, they can do that. If we eventually get them, they might force Russian aviation to push further away. Plus, F-16s can use similar type munition more effectively. But Russia indeed set a record in a way, and I suspect it might be growing. And it represents the most serious problem for our front line, because when 250, 500 kilo bomb drops in a position, the explosion crater is about 10 to 12 yards in diameter and about 5 yards deep. It doesn't add any health to any of our warfighters. The worst part is not this. The worst is that in about 2021, I had a very serious conversation with our private manufacturers of arms, private companies who offered a similar type of modernization system for free-falling air bombs to convert them to guided bombs. And this system was actually better and more precise than the Russia has. It went through testing, and that's why we have some data, and they suggested for that system to be implemented. Much less expensive than building a different type of bomb. And we could have had it in our troops, but what do you think our dear country tell them? No, we don't having need that. That's what they said. Okay, I get it. Maybe they said that before the war, that was their position, but now we are in the war for a year and a half. Why have they not returned to that problem? We should not be shy to take good decisions that our enemies already are using effectively. Add some concrete to the front lines, add something to the wings of the bomb so it flies better. Yeah, it's a rhetorical question, Lex. I guess we don't need really to answer that one. Okay, so a lot of reaction was caused by a publication in magazine Time, so-called a report from the office of the president with under the headline that nobody believes in the victory of Ukraine more than I do, according to Zelensky, highlighting that nobody. Message is rather banal, I think. You can stick that message onto anybody. You put it on somebody and you'll always be right, because the way each of us believes in certain things, nobody else does, right? What is the content of this message, you think, in this case? I would pay more attention here to specifics of use of English language. English speakers might read it better than us here, but the accent is on nobody. In the logic of English language, it can be read. It doesn't mean that it's the only way to read it, but one of the logics behind that is pointing towards authoritarianism of Zelensky. Translating that into Russian, the meaning could be nobody besides me knows how to win that war. And this is not an accent. President could have put an accent there that I'm the only one who believes it so much, and I'm doing everything to enable us to win. But one of the definite lines that is expressed in the title, and you can unfold it deeper in the article, basically highlights that I'm the only one who understands how it goes, how we should do it. And this was the message that I underlined in my post today, because I think I understand what he's talking about. Because first couple interviews that Zelensky gave to Schuster were done with my active participation. I communicated with Schuster as well. Do you know that he was awarded an order from our president in 2022? Right, and he turned out to be so unthankful, ungrateful to him with this article. Alexey, many people are asking, are they referring to you for a non-named commentary from the presidential office? No. I know that some people are speculating, but this time I can say it was not me. My conscience is clear. I understand everything rather clearly in the message. A strange situation that happened around the promotion of this publication. When it was initially published, President's office didn't see anything wrong with it. Yermak posted on his media a link to that, saying that presidential interview, etc. So, do you think they misunderstood? Because when the resonance started to rise about wrong interpretation, then presidential office removed promotion of this article from their pages. Nikolai, what one needs to understand about this publication. Here, Schuster is a genius journalist in this regard. Yuri paid attention to that white collar, the detail that was highlighted, and the image that you get of reading this article is Zelensky walking empty corridors of power, where he believes and screams and speaks very loudly about victory, and his compatriots are even afraid to contradict him, and he walks into the darkening corridor further out into the darkening history alone. And understandably, the West has different opinions. It was never being related in one article in one magazine, but I think Schuster got it very geniusly, the flavor of this moment, and he presented it using several examples: the destiny of counteroffensive, mobilization, destiny of Reznik, white collar, etc. And I think he grasped this moment absolutely precisely. And this interview, I think, is somewhat a threshold, after which neither us nor the West can continue living in the same manner as we did before. And Schuster expressed in a few words a lot of things that many people feel, and I see reaction to this material. Many people, especially thinking ones, leaders of public opinion, starting to accuse Schuster and the West in wanting to disrupt the Western aid to Ukraine. And it's somewhat fashionable now to unite around president. I want to say that it's always fashionable to unite around the president, especially during times of war. And it's right. I actually would, it would press me hard to find somebody who is happy about this publication. But our problem is not that we don't want to join around president. Our problem is that nobody understands how to do it right according to presidential opinion. And for the year and a half, he was thinking that he is the leader who knows it all. And he was proving that with his actions both in Ukraine and abroad. Not surprising that after a year and a half of such a solo motion, solo run, the opinion both in Ukraine and outside Ukraine started to shift, especially with people who think deeper and who understand the depth of a pit where we find ourselves in right now. A lot of people are still aggregating around president and saying, yes, we'll join, unite around the president. It's damned West and it's Arestovych with his pals here on screen. But if you look further, it is the first stage of getting closer to reality because they ran too far away from reality, right? And what's the first stage? It's denial, then anger, then propitiation. So that's understandable. We're now kind of going from denial to anger. But people who analyze things, they can see it rather clearly. And they can understand us who are running a little bit ahead of the curve and who are describing the situation that they will likely be feeling in the next period when they will learn more things and understand their reality is different from what they were hoping it to be. Half of Ukrainians, 49%, think that we will reach the borders of 1991 as the result of this current war, current campaign. This shows you how disconnected they are from reality. Perhaps due to that telemarathon that we have in the media, that there is no counter opinion, there is no objection to be heard to the presidential line. But those people who think they can understand that this is different from where we actually are. Look, Alexey, a couple of streams ago, you commented a question about Zelensky to explain your position about where he is and whether there is a conflict and how much is the degree of his responsibility in regards to counteroffensive. But you do have basis to at least suspect that he is not fully controlling all questions related to armed forces. He controls a lot of things related to armed forces, but he is not the final decision maker about shifting effort from one side of the front to another. Because this is where military, when warfare shifts and mixes with politics. And politicians, essentially war is an extension of politics. That's why politicians make a decision where to attack, on the south or on the east. These decisions are not made by Zelensky. He recommends things, but final say is on our president. Given that we knew your commentary on this regard, we knew what you said, and I'm reading this article in Times, Zelensky explaining why the counteroffensive is going so slow. He says that he'll need to fire at least one minister and one of the high-level generals responsible for that counteroffensive. And the article also highlights that unnamed source in the presidential office also commented that military want to just sit in the trenches and don't want to rise and go into attacks, and that some commanders just don't have any choice, so they have to follow the orders from above. And according to source, unnamed source in president's office, there were orders to go and deoccupy Gorlovka at the beginning of October, straight from Kiev. And the article also says that some of the frontline commanders started to refuse orders about offensive, even if they are being sent directly from presidential office. So this information at least confirms that from the office of the president, there are direct orders to some commanders on the front line, avoiding Zelensky, as I understand. Do you remember the moment when President said, well, we'll liberate a couple of towns on the east a few weeks ago? Not quite. Yeah, there was a moment like that. And I want to say that this is not the first time and not the second or third or last time when the question is being posed this way. Let's take Gorlovka, how the president would say. It's similar to what Putin says, let's take Avdeevka. What for? Putin is going into his election cycle, so he needs some wins on the war, some wins on the front. In Russia, they always support, they have a rise in public opinion when they take something. You can judge by the previous captures that they had. And it is reflected in the number of people willing to go get contract signed and go fight this war. And general support of war by Russians is also reflected by successes. So, same thing here. One of the most difficult parts of the art of war is to transfer political goals into military goals and then to transfer it back from military to political. And one can say that the country can fight and has a high degree of preparedness for war when they know how to transition from political to military and back. In Russia, they always had it as a weak point. At the beginning of war, they were putting some absolutely unreal tasks in front of their troops. Now, a year and a half in, they are starting to learn and they're putting real tasks. They're small, they're weird, they're not really effective, but they're following political will. So Putin essentially is putting his will there and saying, let's take Avdeevka, let's straighten the front, and let's cut Donbass from underneath, and that's the whole story. And why do we need Gorlovka in this case, on these 1,300 kilometers of the front? What does it solve? One can say that Gorlovka is a key to the Eastern Front, but Eastern Front is city-type agglomerations and difficult terrain. If we were attacking Gorlovka, let's say, on the 23rd of February, then yes, we would have split Donetsk and Lugansk, would have gotten a key and from the front and would start breaking them apart. And if Russia would not reinforce whatever they had there, and we would just have to fight whatever was stationed. But now taking Gorlovka doesn't give us anything. It also puts us in a difficult position. It stretches our capability to fight. So ultimate outcome would be a more difficult position on the front. While the victory in the south would have given us a strategic break in this war. And now, since we failed to do that in the south in time, let's, I guess we're following the principle politically, let's at least take something and demonstrate to our Western allies that we can still take towns. But can we afford to fight the war in that fashion where we are? And instead of doing strategically right decisions on the front, that is what defeats Zelensky in the long term. When decisions are made not on substance, but on image. When we're not going in small steps to achieve a big goal, but we're rather making a decision to impress. Fort Bakhmut, and our troops are fighting like wolves, like lions there, but ultimately we're losing people, and we cannot answer the question why. If you fight the war right, if you prepare for the war right, if your military-industrial complex is working, if your economy is working, then you don't need all these tricks to inform people of your successes. You don't need to invent any PR projects, because all your real achievements, they speak for themselves. And thousands of voices will chime in and will support you. And we will be here talking and supporting successes on the front, because many people attack us and say that we're here to disrupt the power of president and do something wrong. No, I was among the first who was taking all the negative from the president, and I think I proved enough that my heart is bleeding for our country. But it would be fantastic if they started taking right decisions right now, but they're not learning. They're continuing to exacerbate the situation. And that's the problem. Nobody is interested in us losing control or in us suffering losses on the front, because it's our lives, it's the lives of our friends and our families. But if the government, if the leadership behaves in a fashion that it causes more damage than helps the situation, we have to talk about it. And once again, I want to highlight that these projects, let's take Gorlovka, I've heard quite a few of those while I was in the office. They essentially make Zelensky to grasp for answers, because he understands from the military standpoint it is madness, it is not effective. It will mean that he will have to waste resources where they should not be wasted. And along that line is where the decisions are being made between military and between politicians. And in Ukraine, it goes in a certain way, in a certain flavor. And I want to say that starting from defense of Bakhmut, there were a lot of strategically inadequate decisions on the front. And inadequate to the current circumstance. The worst situation you can do is make decisions that are not matching the current circumstance. And the second mistake you can do is to not take strategically important decisions that are answering the current circumstances. So, Alexey, here I want to bring attention back to the strategic line that's highlighted in Time magazine, because I think it is reflective of the moods that exist in the president's office. And they're showing a lot of adequate estimations. Those unnamed officials whom express different positions, different opinions from Zelensky, they're saying that we understand the situation. Also, Western elites that are also indicated with their positions to the contrary. And today, there was an interesting document of 23 Republicans that they brought to attention of Biden. They tried to outline the position of Republican Party in regards to the war in Ukraine. And I think for Ukraine, it is advantageous in a sense that there is some crystallization of the Republican position surfacing up, and we can discuss it now. There are 12 points, and I'll read a few of them. For example, President Biden and President Zelensky need to give a real strategy of victory to the Congress of United States, because just supporting the friend of the country until they win is not a strategy. We need to understand what would be the route and how long will it take. They don't have to be precise, but we need to understand the final goal and the exit criteria. Second, what is the approximate cost related with this strategy? Selective revealing of information and filtering what is known, along with funding Ukraine at a rate of $12 billion per month, are not viable options. Third, President Biden and Minister of Defense Austin need to inform American people about the progress of war in Ukraine and also about the counteroffensive results. Fourth, President Biden and Minister of Defense need to clarify why future investments of the United States into this war are necessary, and that includes the definition of what types of weapons are being sent, what exactly type of weapon can help Ukraine to win the war and not to just continue it. Also, we need to understand what weapons were not sent to Ukraine when they could have changed the trajectory of this war. And if one reads these criteria attentively, you can see a lot of reason, a lot of useful questions that they're posting, because essentially they're talking about hey, if United States will be giving the right weapons to Ukraine, the war can be expeditiously concluded in favor of Ukraine. Yeah, everything is rather logical in the Republican Party in this regard. And also in presidential office, there are smart people. They were, they are, and I hope they will be, because one needs to regulate and hold that. That's why my adventure into presidential office here in Ukraine was also a part of a similar action, similar effort. And now I'll speak vividly, but I think we need to understand the picture, probably 7-minute monologue. So a central topic of American politics right now is a collision course with China. And here, putting it simple, as my American friend said, who will be ruling the world, the striped or the yellow? And this question is posted very sharply, because Congress, during Biden's speech, during Putin's visit to China, there was a publication about American readiness for nuclear war on two fronts. And remember Biden's speech when he said that it's not a time for inner quarrels, because the next 4 or 5 years will define the destiny of civilization and will define the global politics for dozens of years to come. And heads of states, even United States, are not speaking these things too often. Second in importance, that is also reflected in this document, but is not sharply defined, it's not really defined in detail. But until we understand that, we won't understand what's happening in the world and what's the status of American and Ukrainian relations. The question is, which side will Russia be in this conflict, in this future conflict with China? And the main trouble for United States is to make sure that Russia would not find itself on the side of China, neutral, crypto-neutral, seemingly in Chinese camp, but sabotaging some things, or openly anti-China. But that's a very remote ideal. So, in your opinion, how does Ukrainian victory in this war look like in the task of not letting Russia join China? Do United States consider utter defeat of Russia in Ukrainian war as an outcome? And the answer is simple, no, because the moment Russia is fully defeated here, it is being pushed into the arms of China with all its nuclear potential and everything. And then us and the United States and the allies will have to fight against those two foes. And we'll get real tired real soon doing that. So, and the probability of a nuclear war also escalates when China and Russia represent one side of the front. So when they say that we don't want war to expand beyond the current conflict, they mean possible conflict with China and Russia as well. And that's the message I'm trying to deliver to our viewers. Until you understand this undertone that goes here, you will not understand the picture. You'll be talking about the treacherous West that is not helping our soldiers, but they're solving a future task in a future collision with China. However it is, cold or hot, Russia should not be on the side of China. And that's why Ukraine, in their view, cannot utterly defeat Russia, should not utterly defeat Russia. And that's why they're giving us enough arms so that we do not lose, but at the same time, basically, that they are not fully defeated. So they just don't win. And this is not because they're greedy or something, because they're thinking about a bigger picture. They're thinking about a bigger picture, civilizational scale picture. And as a commander can sacrifice a company in the interest of a brigade, it is a very difficult decision that has to happen in war sometimes, but you're usually choosing in war between very bad and very, very, very bad. So right now, they're conducting politics and strategy directed at Russia hanging in halfway somewhere, neither defeat nor victory. Then it's easier to communicate with Russia and to try to persuade it away from joining China. So now let's read that situation from this angle. Putin is going to Xi Jinping. At that time, negotiations and conversation between Xi Jinping and Biden are already on the calendar. And Van Yi already, Minister of Foreign Affairs, already met Americans. What happens in China? Nothing serious comes out. They said all the right words, but then Putin meets Orban. And suddenly, Orban comes out with several very sharp statements. He is comparing Brussels with Moscow of '56, spitting at the graves of the Hungarians who rebelled against Soviet regime, and makes more statements. He doesn't let Sweden to join NATO. Turks, with all the difficulties of their relations, they ratified that, but Hungary didn't. And Sierto, his Minister of Foreign Affairs, goes to Belarus, where they make several statements, where the final one was made by Minister of Defense of Belarus, who comes out and says that, damn, Lithuanians blocked us so much that we need to break a corridor to Kaliningrad region. And basically, Belarus is now talking about direct aggression against NATO, about breaking that corridor. Now we look at Israel, horrible event on the 7th of October. Then we've been waiting for the ground operation that is now unfolding in Gaza. But suddenly, when there is still a fight for public opinion happening, note that Americans sent their 2 aircraft carrier groups, which already indicated the conflict is capable of spilling beyond the local. At that time is when that supposed hit on the hospital happens, with hundreds of casualties, which later turned out to be 80 on the parking lot, but still, it was a sort of Maidan logic to escalate. So then Putin comes out and takes anti-Israeli position, and then we have events in Makhachkala when people storm the airport, trying to find Jews there leaving for Israel. Now we have Yemen expressing their position against Israel and launching a second missile on Israel now. Do you see the logic here? And Chinese, in the meantime, licking Biden head to toe, saying that they love his administration, we need to find agreement, etc. And my hypothesis is as follows. I don't insist that it is the only true way of events unfolding, but I suspect it is. China is expediting its efforts to win Taiwan. In January, Taiwan is having elections. Will China be ready to invade Taiwan militarily, or will they use the degree of blackmail to affect the election outcome? I suspect for now they're probably leaning more towards exerting pressure to affect the elections. But they're trying to tie United States in at least 3 other zones of conflict: Ukraine, Middle East, and probably Lithuania and Poland. Why? Because then Chinese leadership can use Iran, Russia, and if you think about it, the attack on Israel was conducted in a certain way that Israel would not be able not to react to the maximum, right? The reaction has to be harsh. And that triggers about 1.5 million Muslims around the world who want to now to somehow express their opinion, or even more go to fight and perhaps kill some of Jews or Americans. Elections in Taiwan are happening in January. Some big military training, for example, China could conduct right next to Taiwan to try to affect them. Meantime, 5 or 6 aircraft carrier groups of United States are busy trying to take the fires out in other parts of the world. And unfortunately for me, these events for now seem to indicate that. And if they will keep escalating, leading into January, that will be a good indicator that's exactly what's happening. Now imagine there'll be some provocation in the Baltic area from Belarus. NATO will say that they're not ready probably to fight, let's negotiate. The United States will have to pull it through on their own back. And given that there is election year in the United States, there'll be different opposing opinions, so they likely will get bogged down around that. So my hypothesis is that China is expediting the annexation of Taiwan in a much shorter, much more expeditious way than they named before, 2025, 2027, using a number of issues. When American leadership is in crisis and discussion whether they should be intervening, should be not intervening on the events globally. For now, it's just a hypothesis, but what's concerning is that a sudden increase in rhetoric on Orban's party. After meeting with Putin, they became so bold that's very unusual. They refused Sweden joining NATO when even Turks went for it. Now, with that view of the world, do you understand the game that Americans are playing? If this hypothesis is at least partially true, China is leading now that situation. America has to react to a lot of things, and China is making them react. We'll see if anything else will happen in Africa or in some other parts of the world. And on the backdrop of all that, the question, can America give a lot of weapons so Ukraine immediately wins this war with Russia? This probably is inadequate. And the real question here would be not if Ukraine wins in this war with Russia, but which side will Russia be on in this conflict? And every serious escalation on the front, every serious victory of Ukraine on the front pushes Russia into the arms of China. So that state to not win or to not lose is a key for American politics. And in order for them to change their view, we need to show them the right strategy. When they can say, okay, good, let's bet on Ukraine, make sure that they win, it's possible. There is one angle. But for that, we as a country, including our president and our military leaders, we need to display such a high class of game, such a responsibility, that Americans would see that this is a reliable island that we can put our foot on and lean on in our difficult geopolitical game. But I'm sorry, gentlemen, we look like anything but that island of reliability. And I'm reading Schuster's article in the following fashion, and along with statements by Republican Party, that Zelensky is accused not even in corruption, but in incapability of understanding the real problem that European world and civilization at large is facing, that he cannot become a reliable ally for Americans in their very complex fight for the future of global civilization. So they basically acknowledge him to be a somewhat rotten post that you cannot lean against. It'll break. And all their statements about continuous help to Ukraine, etc., they're just projections of a bigger decision made here. He, how to say, acknowledged to be irresponsible or not reliable. The one who lost trust. Speaking very roughly, the team is playing, for example, soccer, or let's say something complicated. Build a boat in order to save, right? And we have, let's say, 12 people that need to throw the bridge across the abyss, but while 6 are going, 6 need to hold the rope, and one of the 6 holding the rope is acknowledged to be unreliable, so they have to change the strategy now. And that's what they're indicating, his incapability to understand the problem at hand and concentrating on narrow, from the point of view of the global strategy, on narrow problems. For us, they're not narrow, right? It's a destiny of our country that we love, for which we're dying and fighting. It's our wives, children, families, all Ukrainians who will either die together or save ourselves together. We can hate each other that many times, but we're still in one boat against Russia in this war. So they're looking at our behavior here and at Zelensky's recognition of the problem. They're saying that we cannot lean on him because the bigger processes require much higher involvement, much higher sacrifice than this. Corruption, everything else is secondary. It's his being not reliable as the global player for Americans, and that's the problem for them. And the biggest tragedy for us is that at the beginning of war, nobody believed in us. Then, in the second phase, they believed in us and said, yeah, these guys actually can. And now we're in a third phase when they're losing that confidence in us again. There was time when America was looking at us thinking that we'll defeat Russia here, we'll put a stop, because Russia will likely waste all their military resources and they won't be able to join China in any capacity. But now with a protracted war, it seems like it's not going to be the case. And we need, if we want to change it, there is a chance to do it, but we need to change a radical, drastic change of our agenda, a big change in our understanding and in our solutions proposed. And only after we change that from economy to politics to war to the ways we control our military and inform our people about the actual events unfolding, about the truth. And then if we also continue leading this course for at least 6 months, then the moods in the West might change, including transferring to us better weapons so we would hold Russia here tighter and do not have an option, leave an option for Russia to join China, or perhaps a complete defeat of Russia. That scenario is also possible, but probably maybe 1% left of that. Can we? I'm skeptical. Can we change everything and shift our strategy without changing the main game players here that Schuster is writing about in his article? Things happen, miracles happened. Apostle Paul fell from the horse and changed his opinion, right? But for that, you need God's intervention, because I don't think us humans can carry it out. Alexey, I have a couple of critical notes here. I think personally that China is not ready yet to escalate the situation and to play annexation of Taiwan on the background of getting United States in the conflict everywhere in the world. I don't know if China is ready to do that. Why? Because they are not close technologically. They have still a program 2025, according to which they need to concentrate more technological advantages on their and solutions of their country. There's not much time left, and they're mostly there, but still, their goal is to have a certain number of technologies that they may need in their military process, and they have some serious issues with aviation and with a few other military components. So that's one. The other is that I think the West can bet on defeat of Russia in this war in Ukraine when they see that Russia is 100% in Chinese camp. Then they can bet on that, on utter defeat. And what was happening in Dagestan, part of Russian Federation, in Makhachkala airport, I think the whole world observed that event. I want to ask you a question here. How do you see these events? Do you think this is a part of a transition of power in Russia and all these rumors that Putin has died, that there are some people fighting for power, Patrushev is trying to promote his son, regardless if Putin is alive or not. But I think that reflects that the level of how unsure Russian elites are and where will they go from here. Because what was happening in Dagestan, on one hand, it looks like a technologically organized event, but it did hit the image of Russia on a global scale, and it made Kremlin react to that situation at large, replace local elites in Dagestan to somehow accommodate the balance of powers that is changing there on regional and federal levels. And that situation somehow shows that Russia continues Prigozhin line since his mutiny, where it is impossible to solve problems appearing in Putin's system that grew up in the 2000s, because without spilling out into the public field all these cataclysms and issues, same as Prigozhin's mutiny, the system cannot resolve conflicts internally. The only way to solve it is by external expression. So in this light, what's happening in Russia is probably an element that holds Americans and the West at large from their desire to finish this war faster, because that squabble that happens in Russia opens them additional space that they can use, space for maneuver. So, speaking of your arguments, Yuri, none of the wars in this world had started when everything was complete, right? So, from that point of view, China may not have achieved their goals yet, but the election year in United States gives them probably a better situation than when they finished the technology transfer and preparations, but then there is a different president in the United States who is ruling everything with iron hand. In regards to war, I'm not saying they're ready for decision by force, but they will create an illusion of being ready to affect the elections. And for that, they need to distract the United States to bog them in different conflicts around the world. 2 aircraft carrier groups left for Israel on the 7th and 8th of October, right? Which technically was an event that was abnormal, but Israel could generally manage that situation. But Americans, I think, had indications that this is probably a manifestation of a larger scale conflict. That's why they sent them. As for Russia, I would say that the main hypothesis is that in Russia there are 2 parties fighting, pro-China and pro-West. Among the oligarchs, among the power ministers, among Putin's inner circle, there are people of different opinions. And one group thinks that Russia needs to be with the West or neutral to the West, and then there is a second group which thinks China should be much closer with Russia and Russia with China. Second group seems to be smaller, but they're probably on key positions, something like Putin or Shoigu. Look, in Dagestan, there's still a regime of counter-terrorist operation. In Russia and in these circumstances, if you walk with balloons of our own color, you'll be executed. And here we have a crowd taking over the international airport and problematizing situation in the world at large. So this became possible only on one condition: when Putin took a very straight anti-Israel position and they started supporting anti-Semitism. When Putin accepted Hamas delegation the day before, even Turks did not accept that delegation. Erdogan said his speech about the possible war of cross and crescent moon, but they have not accepted Hamas on the official level, and Putin did. And people looked at that, including in Dagestan, Muslim Dagestan in Russia, and decided that powers support that position, and they talk about supporting to Palestine, and they decided to make a run on the airport, and the guards defending airport decided that probably answering the same question: do they shoot at the crowd or not? Well, Moscow kind of also against the Jews, so let them break through. So if the crowd of from Dagestan would run to move Moscow powers, of course they would be shot at. But if they're running to attack Jews that Putin has taken certain position against, they decided not to shoot at them. So that crowd was generally covered by official Putin's position that run on the airport. Tsar allowed for that, so nobody will stand in the way. So in Russia, definitely there is an inner fight happening between two sides, two factions, pro-China and pro-West. And now imagine the difficult path that Ukraine needs to walk in light of all these global circumstances. But this way allows you to understand the logic of American position. And one of the key elements is having Russia on the side of West, perhaps neutral, but still Russia. And I'm putting that question sharply for a reason. Russia on the side of the West is an ideal option, at least in a neutral fashion, but I'm putting the question sharply for a reason. After that, the war with China is closing as an option. We're not going into the Third World War by pulling Russia on our side. Many people in American government understand that. Many people in the global analytical community understand that this is exactly the undercarpet fight that is happening around the world in regards to Ukraine, United States, and in that big triangle of probable conflicts around. So if we understood that, or at least our leadership would understand that, just by the fact of understanding it, we would be considered as a worthy ally. Technologically, economically, things can be remedied. You can pull us up eventually. Look, I recently attended one of the global IT events, and I saw the amounts they're talking about when they discuss donations. When they have an average size of donation about $100 million. So from that point of view, our country and our struggle need to be gathering trillions, right? And we would be given trillions if people knew that we know how to use them. Remember when Greece was in crisis, how many billions did they get? Several hundred billions, right? I think it was 300 B with a B, right? Almost 400 billions. So you think the West would not be able to give us 500 billions just like that if they saw the value in that? And all these stories that we're short of $12 billion a month, it's not about that. It's a bigger question. Where is that going to? Look how it looks from Republicans and those who are soberly judging the situation. The general direction of the conflict that America needs Russia to be on which side on is one way, and support of Ukraine is going different way. So it's almost supporting Ukraine and disrupting the other goals. So we need to support Ukraine only to the degree that they don't fail, but we definitely don't want to support Ukraine to a larger degree. And look how hard this discussion goes. In America, there are a lot of people who, understanding the bigger picture, still saying that we still need to support Ukraine to the maximum. And I personally spend a lot of hours of my time right now trying to explain to the world, to our allies, that despite certain deficiencies of our leadership, the best thing they can do is increase aid to Ukraine. Not just give some aid to Ukraine, but increase it. Because even in the framework of bigger game against China and pulling Russia towards the West, there is logic there. And Yuri just voiced that. We'll see, Alexey, right? We'll see the results of people diplomacy of Alexey Arestovych soon. I'm not the only one who's trying to do that. I can just say that I definitely am. And I'm outlining that, yeah, we do have deficiencies, but you guys are definitely interested in us winning to make sure that Ukraine remains strong. Not just give us bare necessities so we don't collapse, but we need to be strong on this front. I think one of the key things you mentioned is about the size of these donations, because one of the things that they indeed need to understand is where it goes to and how it is controlled. Let's actually go to the matter of donations, because there is an interesting conflict in the information field about our fundraisings here. I didn't want to call it this way, but that's what's happening. According to some media in Ukraine, ex-advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine made a statement that charity fund of Sergei Pritula is forbidding military from accepting donations from Arestovych fund gathering group by threatening to not donate to those military from his fund. So what is happening here is that it just once again reinforces the idea that volunteer aid in our country is used in political goals, right? Yuri made a right statement today. These people do the same thing over and over again in our society. They try to monopolize the moment they get. There are two different positions. There are people who try to monopolize, and there are others who are saying that, well, okay, you're our political opponents, but we're still in the same boat. We either sink together or we win together. So we're open to work with our political enemies to make sure that our soldiers remain alive on the front. And the drones that we gathered money for, by the way, let's explain where the funds go to. Because those people close to the fund of Pritula, they're pushing a certain narrative in the media. They're saying that Arestovych included in this process only when they indicated that he is so popular, but he is not aiding the military. Let's straighten it out. Yuri and Nikolai, since what day of this war am I gathering money here when I started doing streams with you guys? Yeah, probably since the beginning. And we just didn't advertise that much. And frankly, with your aid and the help of our viewers, and just by agreeing on certain things, I'm helping front a lot. And I did mention that in Galavanov's stream, but I spent about 11 million hryvnias of my personal money to support the front. I just wasn't screaming about that everywhere. Why am I starting to be more active here on the streams now? Because right now we have our friends, our detachments fighting near Avdeevka who need certain kinds of help. And I'm trying to aid them to any degree I can. And it just happens that under my name in our streams, we are gathering more money faster. And before that, I was doing that randomly, Yuri and Nikolai were doing the same things. Since our capabilities are different from individuals who are donating certain amounts, we can usually do more. So we've been doing that all along. These drones that we did, we closed in about 8 minutes. Next day, the detachment that got these drones, they captured a grove from the enemy, returned it back, and they found bodies of 4 of our deceased soldiers that were considered to be MIA and returned them to their relatives. So what are these other fundraisers attacking us for? For these successes on the front, or what? And I will add here a little more. Dear Ukrainians, fellow citizens, please understand one simple thing, that for Russians, for Putin's regime, they don't care if which fund is fighting which fund on the territory of Ukraine. If we're quarreling with Poroshenko, with somebody else, they don't care. Because if they win over Ukraine, everything will be like in 1917, 1920. Everybody later will be either in Gulag or in the grave or in immigration, all these confronting parties. Or the others who stay alive will just stay slaves when they were making Soviet people out of Ukrainians back in the day, so it'll be something similar. That's why, please, refrain from using that eternal problem that we have from throwing shit at each other. We're all sitting in one boat, and if we can save a single soldier on the front who is saving Ukraine today, we should be doing that at any cost without wasting time, because wasting time is only aiding our enemy. Our government is slow. Our government is not too effective in remedying certain deficiencies. And that leads to the deaths of our soldiers and officers on the front. So if we, as a part of society who can mobilize these impressive resources that are dependent on our reputation and our capabilities, we should be doing it. We should be doing it regularly and immediately. And together with Pritula Fund and other fundraising organizations, we should be all doing that. with the congressmen and everybody. Why can't we mobilize our resources and perhaps hold Avdeevka? What if we manage to hold it, and if there is a way to hold it, let's do it. Let's help Ukraine to win there. But we can only do that if we are together, like we were at the beginning of this invasion, when everybody understood that everything depends upon us. Regardless if you're white, green, black, or purple, you need to do everything you can to save the country, in which we can build our Ukrainian future, where we can live good, where our kids can have good future, and we won't be in emigration at best if we lose this country. So it doesn't make sense. It's too early, and we actually shouldn't be fighting over who is playing what political role in this process. Because when you think about your political dividends during the biggest challenge to your country, you will lose. That's why I'm appealing to different sides to stop playing these idiotic political games and seeing politics in every step when we're talking about existential matters. And it depends upon our actions, and I think you guys can support us. Here, listen, they put the soldiers in a certain position, right? When they make these statements. Now the soldiers and officers have to, what, conceal that they received aid from Arestovych and Romanenko? Because some commanders decided to play nice with the fund of Pritula, and some other forces will also affect things on the front. I already said that the officer has only two routes, to either serve his leadership or to serve his country. Unfortunately, a lot of people choose to serve their leadership, but their subordinates and their relatives of their subordinates will ask of them, and their destiny will ask of them. I sincerely recommend commanders to not propagate these rumors that you should not be accepting aid from Arestovych fund raising activity. Alexey, I want to add one more thing here. Yes, Nikolai. It's an important thing. The aid that we're gathering here, we're not gathering that aid from us, from the three of us. It's the same citizens of Ukraine, and by the way, not only Ukraine, right? We reach out globally. They are supporting military of Ukraine, and we are seeing these requests. I'm actually in charge of checking these requests that we're getting from the front. And people are saying that if somebody is refusing a certain aid, please, I actually see that in the notes. Hey, if somebody will refuse, please, we are ready to take that aid. Yeah, Nikolai, this is essentially as a political play, trying to separate brigades, that one would be taking aid from us, others would be taking aid from Pritula, and the like. We have a lot of statements from the front who are saying, yeah, sure, if somebody refuses, give that to us, we'll take the drone. But once again, let's not separate military. Let's not create any clientele for different funds. It should be all united. Once again, we're not touching this money in any fashion. This money go directly to the cards of military, unlike some other funds that ingest money in their own coffers and then find ways to distribute that. Let's not go deeper into this, but we're not touching that money. We're directing money directly to the military. Because when somebody says, you'll not take money from Arestovych fundraising effort, guys, you're not too bright. Because people who are sending us money, they live here. They're our citizens. They could be grandma who is taking a little bit from her pension to send to the front. And they could be our allies from across the border who are sending money. Some of them have a lot of money. Some of them are millionaires who are sending big money to buy certain big vehicles and big donations. From Western aid organizations whom we aid and help to direct certain help in certain military support areas. So you're not taking money from us. You basically, when you take that position, you're telling to people supporting you that we don't need your aid. Tell that to your soldiers, to your subordinates, that you're not taking any aid. Yeah, that looks real weird. And under our today's stream, there is a link to 17th Tank Brigade for a vehicle They have positions near Bakhmut, and they're using quadricycles to get there. And in summer times it works, but now they're looking for a regular vehicle for winter time to get there. And please aid if you can. The link is down in the description, and this money going directly to them. All right. I have a last question for today. While that small fundraising is happening, I wanted to go back to Time magazine and to that framework about commands from the presidential office to the front, and what they say at the beginning in that framework, that before the winter comes, we should expect a change of strategy and significant changes in the team of the president. And they're talking about firing of one senior general for a slow counteroffensive, supposedly. I have a question. Do you expect that maybe that firing will be directly related to Zaluzhny or not? I don't think that it will be Zaluzhny. I think it will be somebody else, because Zaluzhny has a lot of support by public opinion and our allies. But the question remains, how would the other generals relate to that? Because firing the generals for the losses and for the failures that political leadership is actually the reason for, because everybody knows who in reality is guilty. When they were actually guilty themselves, of course, they would understand that. But when political leadership refused to send troops that were sent endlessly to Bakhmut, refused to send it to the front in the south, then, and we're, I think, talking about Tarnavsky or somebody else in this case, I don't think it will be taken lightly by the generals, and it will not be good. And whatever is not done according to your conscience, it will not end well. And I would advise against firing the generals right now. First, you need to change the attitude to the military as the institute that is actually holding this front line, that is holding our country, and then make a decisions later. Otherwise, it is not a solid decision. All right. I think we're done for today. I think we're done with the news. Thank you for the commentary. And please support the vehicle fundraiser for the Tankers Brigade. Once again, tankers are one of the main forces that burn the armored vehicles of the enemy, who are stopping them. That basically is a stopping power on the front. Thank you, everybody. Have a quiet night. Goodbye.